Hello, I'm Michael Bott.
And I'm Rupert Soskin.
And this is the Standing with Stones podcast.
10 years ago, we made an epic documentary about the standing stones, stone circles, and other ancient monuments of the British Isles. And now the stones are calling us back, and we'd like to share our passion and fascination with the ancient past in this series of podcasts. Hope you enjoy it.
In this, the very first episode, we'd like to answer the most asked question raised by our film. Is the stone in the chamber of Bryn Celli Ddu a fossil tree trunk?
And we feel that there's a need to pay attention to a place we merely passed through when we made the film. That's Stonehenge, just what has been happening there in the last 10 years.
So, welcome to episode 1 of the Standing with Stones podcast. Now, before we get underway, we'd like to say a very big thank you. This would not be happening now if it weren't for you. And we're talking about you, the fans, a wonderful group of people who not only bought and enjoyed our film, but over the past 10 years since its release, have continued to support us and engage with us via Facebook and elsewhere, even when it might have seemed that Rupert and I had disappeared off to do other things.
We know there has always been a demand for us to do something more, to perhaps produce another film with more scope. And after having found that making films about rocks in fields is actually quite an expensive indulgence, we've not been able to see a way forward. After the epic investment of time and money that Standing with Stones was, we just couldn't justify it financially.
However, now we have crowdfunding, and this, dear listeners, is Rupert and me dipping our toes in the potential that might bring. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, as you probably know, are crowdfunding platforms for one-off projects. Patreon, on the other hand, is a crowdfunding platform for artists, musicians, and creators who do ongoing work that gives fans the chance to support their work by becoming a patron, enabling the continuation of that work by donating a monthly subscription.
This podcast will remain free and available to all, but by making a donation through Patreon of as little as $1 a month, that's 71p on this side of the Atlantic, you'll also receive our undying gratitude as well as access to a whole range of exclusive goodies that will be unavailable to non-patrons.
So, this is an appeal to help us carry on producing this podcast and all sorts of other megalithic content, as well as get to the point when we can make another Standing with Stones film. Please go to patreon.com/Standing with Stones. Have a look at what's on offer, and please become one of our patrons. There's a range of subscription levels to choose from with some exciting rewards and perks on offer, and we hope you'll find a level that suits you and that will help us to produce a great podcast, interviews, live broadcasts, videos, and ultimately, perhaps, another film. And now, on with the show. And that means we kick off the show with that wonderful oxymoron of prehistoric news, by which we mean anything that's caught our eye recently that changes or illuminates our understanding of our Neolithic and Bronze Age ancestors. Rupert, what have we got?
Well, I'll tell you what we've got, and I don't know that it adds to our understanding at all. There's a wonderful discovery in Sweden that they've found a place, actually at the bottom of a lake, but back in the day it wouldn't have been. This is 8,000 years old, and they found heads on spikes.
Oh, lovely.
It's gorgeous. And the fascinating thing is that, our association with, say, medieval England, and we imagine people having their heads cut off and being stuck on spikes to show everybody else what might come of them if they don't behave themselves. But actually, these appear to be revered members of the community. This was actually a display of, and I don't even know how best to articulate that. Should have practiced this. Sorry, folks. This was honouring the dead in a way of keeping them on display. There seems to be some secondary burial involved. So where they used to let bodies rot down a bit before they did anything more final with them.
It did a bit of excarnation.
Indeed, they did. And there's a family. There were injuries, so the men and women who'd been beaten around the head, but not killed by that. There was healing in the skull injuries. There was healing around that.
Yeah, but that's the point, isn't it? That they haven't been killed in order to be put on display.
No, indeed. No.
Yeah.
And there was a tiny baby skeleton with them. So it's so small, they reckon that it was probably in childbirth or just afterwards. Yeah. And we know that it was an honouring thing because the bodies were surrounded by bones and other artifacts of animals. So there were bears and boars and deer. As you do. Yeah. A fascinating discovery. So we will flag the links up on the page, so people interested in whatever we bring up, you can follow those links and read more about them. But yeah, heads on spikes, that couldn't be ignored.
No, can you remember the name of the site? It's in Sweden,
Canal Jordan.
Canal Jordan.
Forgive my pronunciation. This is probably wrong.
Okay, so probably much more to be said on that, to be found out about that if you follow the link. KANALJORDEN if you want to do your own Google search on that.
Excellent.
Heads on spikes.
There you go. Over to you. What have you got?
Yeah. What have I got? Well, as we've been setting up this podcast and generally gearing up Standing with Stones again on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, it seems quite a few more people have come across us. And one of these persons being one Toby Angel. Now, Toby Angel turns out to be one of the founders of a company called Sacred Stones. And what Sacred Stones, the company, are doing, they're a commercial company. They're building, would you believe, modern long barrows for people to inter their loved ones, the ashes of their loved ones in urns and so on and so forth, inside these long barrows. Exciting. And they're really... they are really quite something. They're beautiful to look at from the outside, as you'd expect. Actually, particularly reminds me of Bella Snow.
Right.
That kind of Teletubby look. But they're looking as you'd expect to from the outside, and on the inside they've incorporated many. Chambers, these are multi-chambered, but more niche, aren't they? They're not large chambers, but
niche
small
for ashes.
niches. Niches for ashes. So yeah, it's a modern alternative interment service. But I thought it was quite extraordinary.
It's lovely. If you're not a follower of any particular religion or whatever, then maybe that's a really nice thing to be able to do with departed loved ones.
Yeah. I mean, on the face of it, it may seem a bit naff, but actually having spoken to them and seen what they're doing, they're really taking care. And they're very excited about the difference it makes for people who have lost loved ones. And it seems that the act of interring in a long barrow, being close to the earth, makes it a far more personal experience for them. That the relationship, the process of interring their relatives is a far more profound experience than it would have been in an Orthodox burial or otherwise. So it's just worth noting, because I think it informs to a certain extent how we can view people's profound relationship to the dead, the profound relationship to the dead that our ancestors have. If modern day people are having much more profound reactions and involvement with the process through burial at a Longbearer. Hopefully we can get some of them on the podcast later and delve a bit deeper into that. So that was that. We'll put the link in the in the show notes. So yeah, more, Rupert. What have you got?
Yes, I'll tell you. This one is really exciting for me. They have found over in it's Western Armenia, so east of Turkey, basically. They have found an 8,000-year-old settlement. And the reason I find this so exciting is because we have this chasm, this gulf of time between Göbekli Tepe over there, which is like 10, 11, 12,000 years old. And then, what the hell happened between then and our massive monument building, Giza Plateau, you're still talking about 5,000, 6,000 years ago. Ancient Greeks or, Mesopotamia, whichever civilization you care to look at, or our own megalithic building 5,000, 6,000 years ago, what on earth happened in between? So a settlement that dates to 8,000 years ago is significant. It's a bridge, that we're gradually filling in some of these blanks. And the name of the place is Akashan. Now, again, sorry, apologies if that's an appalling pronunciation, but that's broadly Akashan in Western Armenia, and a good one to I recommend anybody to have a look at that and follow up on developments there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we can expand upon these kind of subjects as we go on in our podcast. But this is the wonderful thing. I hope we can at some point get some kind of timeline going. I know timeline is a visual thing, but we can explore, what came first, what came when, what came where, so that if things link up, then we can, speculate about the links. Yeah,
absolutely, and really fascinating to see what happened concurrently. It's quite surprising, really, the things that were happening in Europe as opposed to the Middle East, say, at different times. We must do that. Yes, watch this space, folks. Yeah, we'll do that.
Absolutely. And there's one more thing we've got from Prehistoric News, and this time I believe you're about to push us back.
Yes,
back.
A long
way back in
way
time.
Back. Yeah, this is quite exciting for a completely different reason. They have found it in northern Israel. They've found the oldest modern human fossil.
Oh my goodness.
The reason that this is exciting is because they can date, it's a jawbone basically, and they can date this to, it's nearly 200,000 years old.
Ooh.
And the exciting thing about it is because they found it in northern Israel, and that basically flies in the face of what we thought were the migration routes out of Africa. This actually puts modern man coming out of Africa about 50,000 years, 50,000 years earlier than expected. So, yes, it's wonderful. Every time you push these things back, you could just love it.
Lots to talk about there. But again, I will put the link down in the notes so that you can investigate. Are there any other details that people might want that are available so people can do a Google search on that?
Just Google oldest known human fossil. You'll get something.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I actually can't remember the name of it, other than the fact that I know it was northern Israel. Can't remember the name of the place. Yeah. Should have made notes. Note to self, make more notes.
So that's it. No more prehistoric news on...
There's tons more news, but we haven't got time.
I know. We must press on. Visiting ancient monuments is often a very personal experience, especially as the vast majority of them are seldom or rarely visited by large numbers of people. So when, during the filming of Standing with Stones, we found ourselves, Rupert and I, alone in the central chamber of Bryn Celli Ddu, there was time to contemplate properly what was there in front of our eyes. Now, we had already been filming for a week or 10 days. I think we'd been travelling through Wales. There we were, on Anglesey in a tomb, in a field, with the whole of Ireland ahead of us. We were due to sail from Holyhead to Dublin, I think, the next day. So what happened, Rupert, in that moment of solitude and contemplation that so disturbed us?
And became the most contentious thing to come out of the entire film. Well, it was my first time there. You'd been there once before, hadn't you?
I had, yeah.
And this was my first time. So all I had to go on was everything that I had ever read in any number of books, including Aubrey Burle. Yeah. And the thing that I was looking forward to seeing was this carefully dressed pillar of stone in the burial chamber. Everybody had referred to it as a carefully dressed pillar of stone. Now, in archaeological terms, carefully dressed means that it was cut to be that shape. And the thing that slapped me straight in the face when I walked in to see this thing was that wasn't cut at all. That was a naturally cylindrical, woody textured thing. The only thing that made any sense to me was that it was a petrified tree trunk. And so there's me looking at or thinking of all the things that I had ever read and knowing in an instant that they were all utterly wrong. It was as if somebody somewhere had said something and everybody else had just copied it without ever bothering to check.
Yeah, I can actually remember the look of shock and horror in your eyes, in your own disbelief at the way your brain was working at this, what was in front of your eyes. And, my experience, of course, was, once you'd pointed out that this looked like a fossilized tree trunk, or at least that the surface textures were pretty well identical to what you'd expect the surface of a piece of wood, a trunk of a tree might look like. I couldn't unsee it. That was the thing. It was so bleeding obvious.
Well, the thing that made it such a, I was going to say something rude. The thing that made it so disturbing for me was not the fact that it was just a fossil tree trunk, but the fact that there were cut marks in it. And it looked as if there were axe marks or whatever. And
to be clear, if you haven't actually been there, what I'd like to point out to folk is that unless you've been in that chamber and looked at that pillar with your own eyes and had the 3D experience of being there, it's very difficult to convey how precise those cut marks are. Don't really think you can even see it in a photograph. But when you're there and inches away from it, those cut marks are so sharp. They look like they've been cut with a diamond, something that would be impossible to do after the fact, with any other implement on that stone.
Yeah, I mean, that was if it was worked, if it was tree trunks that had been cut, then when was it cut? Because it was clearly a petrified fossil tree trunk. So, I went into all the agonizings of how old could it have been, how quickly could it have fossilized.
Well, you did agonize. I have this image in my head, if we don't even have a photograph of it, of you actually on the phone from
I was.
from the chamber of Bryn Celli Ddu to you phoned a friend.
I did phone a friend. I did phone a friend to see if they could look up all sorts of questions that I had about how quickly things could petrify under given certain circumstances, But yes, I mean, the thing is that we had, in fact, even today, I still get emails from people asking, is there any news on the fossil tree trunk? And actually, the mystery was solved a couple of years ago, and I did blog about that, but obviously, not everybody gets to see blogs. So, as I said, I'm still getting emails all the time. People asking.
Yeah, well, hence we're using this opportunity to clear that up and make sure.
And what happened was I was contacted out of the blue by Dr. Fionn Reynolds from Cardiff University, I think she's at. And Fionn had been at Bryn Celli Ddu just a couple of days before with a geologist whose name she couldn't remember, which is a shame because I can't even thank the man because I don't know who he is. But this chap had recognized it as blue schist. So blue schist, it's a rock. And the thing is that blue schist is only formed in the most unusual circumstances. And this is in the subduction zones of tectonic plates. So when one plate is sliding under another, if you imagine what can happen to minerals in or rocks in that situation, that you've got this rolling on, and it all happens fairly quickly. And the thing is that it happens at relatively cool temperatures. So the reason that you don't get completely melted rock like you would with say a granite or any other igneous rock. Is that it's cold. These temperatures are 200 to 400 degrees centigrade. You cook your chicken at these sorts of temperatures. So basically, it's where the plates are actually creating this rolling effect and pushing the rock back up to the surface fairly rapidly. So it's almost like forming a stick of seaside rock. And so that entirely explains why the pillar within the burial chamber, why the pillar can be cylindrical, and the textures that you get on it. Okay, they are very, very woody textures. There's no getting around that. But you can see, if it's blue schist, you can see how it formed that way. So it was lovely to have that finally explained, and one of those situations where I was very relieved to be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, we'd all love sensationalist things to be true, but really this isn't a disappointing result at all. It all fits in, nicely. But I'm so glad, that we've actually pointed it out that even if it isn't a fossilized tree trunk, it blooming well looks like one,
and indeed,
which is significant not only for us, but of course for the those that originally found the piece, dug it up, whatever, transported it there and put it in that chamber.
Yeah, it would have been utterly magical to them. They would have found what looked to them like a tree trunk, but it was made of stone in something from between the two worlds, if you like, whatever.
Yeah.
So you can quite understand why it took a special place for them.
Yeah, it should be pointed out as well that the rock comes from a nearby outcrop on Anglesey, which is actually quite a rare outcrop of this. Well, blue schist itself is pretty rare, but
yes,
the particular outcrop on Anglesey, I believe, is quite special.
The funny thing is, that I would have thought that, bearing in mind that it's formed in those conditions, you'd think that you'd find more cylinders of it.
Yeah.
And you don't. So that makes it all the more rare and all the more understandable why they thought it was something significantly magical. Well, I think it's fair to... I don't like to assume, but I think in this instance you can fairly assume that they would have thought it was quite magical. So,
yeah. All right. Well, we hope that clears Bryn Celli Ddu up for everybody and settles the matter in a happy way for all of those concerned.
Fingers crossed. And if it doesn't, do let us know.
That's right. We can all get a good night's sleep now.
Main topic, as we said at the beginning, Stonehenge. Now the thing was, we were very dismissive of it in Standing with Stones, and that was quite deliberate, really, because my main thing about Stonehenge was that if you go and ask 10,000 people in Britain to name a prehistoric site, and probably 9,500 of them are going to say Stonehenge. It's just the only site that everybody seems to know. And our point in Standing with Stones was to show everybody what else was out there. The thing is, we were so dismissive of it, and yet it is such a vastly important place that we thought within this first episode we really ought to redress that apparent dismissive behaviour. So
yeah, I mean, when we made the film, Stonehenge was very much about what visitors might well be missing when they go to the site. And it was very much our perception when we were thinking about what to say about Stonehenge in the film that it was more significant as an incredibly large and complicated community rather than a single monument.
Absolutely. And in fact, you Mike, did all the CGI in the film, which showed a lot of the complexity surrounding the site. But that is the thing, that people go and see this, okay, it's a vastly impressive stone circle, but the site as a whole, going right across, to Avebury, all the way around Stonehenge, Woodhenge, Larkhill, all the way around there, vastly complex array of monuments, and they've just been turning up more and more and more. And I commented in the film that, as far as I'm concerned, I still feel the same today, that this part of Wiltshire must have been the capital of megalithic Britain. I feel quite certain about that. It's still extraordinary what is turning up, and that's why it's so important that we go through some of these wonderful things now.
To redress the balance a bit, I think, as you said. So, I'm personally, I don't think I've been, keeping completely on the ball as to what's been happening at Stonehenge. But am I right in thinking that the perspective on Stonehenge has shifted in the mainstream very much so in the last few years, and that that shift has been as a result of the work done by the Riverside Project?
The Riverside Project, funnily enough, the Riverside Project was still very much, in swing when we were filming. It kicked off, Mike Parker Pearson. I mean, all hail. That man is, we should all call him Mr. Stonehenge, really. But he was really the main man in all of that. And it ran from 2003. It ran and finished in, I think it was finished in 2009. But they were uncovering all sorts of stuff around. I'm still going to call it the Wiltshire City. And a number of things have come out of this. And for me, one of the most significant is, if you go back quite some years now, it was Professor Tim Darvill, one of my personal heroes archaeologically. Now, Tim was the one who...
And showing, didn't he not write the foreword?
He did write the foreword to the book, Standing with Stones. Yes, yeah. Bless him, he did. Now, Tim was the guy who showed categorically that the blue stones at Stonehenge came from Preseli. And what's happened more recently in work coming from this is that they have actually found the quarries where the stones were worked. And this is just wonderful. You can see the chisel marks. They hammered in wooden wedges and let the rain expand those wooden wedges to split the stones. There are ramps and causeways where they were clearly... this must have been a massive, almost factory where they were, heaving stones off and carting them away on sledges. It's a marvellous discovery. And
yes, and I'm so glad, that when we were standing there with the Preseli Hills in sight, I can't remember the name of the site that we're actually standing on.
Do you know what? I'm ashamed to say
you said, you said so confidently to camera, the blue stones at Stonehenge, they came from up there.
What were they thinking?
Now, this was before... What were they? That's right. But that was before Tim Darvill had actually nailed it on the head. At that time, it was very much, a choice you made whether to believe the Salisbury Plain Sarsen theory, or what am I talking about? Salisbury Plain, that they came from, that they came locally, or that they came all the way from the Preseli Hills. And there was a lot of vociferous argumentation going on.
There was.
So it's very, very good that that has been nailed one way, with certainty one way.
I think one of the things that also needs to come out of this is our acceptance that, put it another way, we have become, with every passing century, as an animal, we have become progressively more and more lazy. And we want everything to be done as quickly as possible, and we want everything to be done as inexpensively as possible, and we want everything to be as easy as possible. Whereas you go back in time, so go past the period of cathedral building or whatever, where it was the work itself was what mattered. And so going back, the fact that it was an enormous amount of effort to move a large piece of stone 100 miles, well, so what? We can do it. Let's do it. It's only our modern mindset that says, they can't have done that. Of course they can. Of course they could. And the fact that we've...
Because we couldn't be bothered.
Yeah, but that's it exactly. And yes, I have so many kind of glib concepts about how man would have done certain ridiculous things back then because they were possible. It's only us now who feel that you wouldn't bother to do that. Well, yes, you would. Yeah. So yes, Bluestone's moving to Stonehenge. I think an absolutely wonderful discovery.
Terrific work. Really, hats off to
Parker Pearson and all.
Hats
yes,
off
indeed.
For the perseverance. Yeah. What else has come to?
Well, another of the marvellous ones is that near Lark Hill they have. It's Cat's Brain actually. Cat's Brain is near Lark Hill. They have found a new, if that is the right adjective, they have found a new long barrow, which completely ploughed to the ground. And again, modern technology. This was only discovered because of aerial reconnaissance. I don't know if it was from a plane or if it was from a drone, but the markings were found or were spotted in a field. And it's a substantial long barrow has been found at Cat's Brain.
So, given that this is a new find, does that mean that we can all be excited about new archaeology from the site?
Well, I hope so. The thing is, it's been so flattened. It's been flattened for a very long time, and this was only found because of aerial photographs showing crop markings. The way so much stuff is found these days, particularly with drones and stuff, that you see crop markings that reveal all sorts of underlying archaeology. Who knows what's in there? They are excavating it, so fingers crossed. But interesting that if you imagine the shape, that it's got it's described as two huge banana-shaped ditches flanking the outline of a trapezoidal timber structure that was once covered with earth. No, it's long. It's over 19 meters long and over 10 meters wide. And typically...
It's quite a lot, isn't it? That is quite
big.
a lot.
It's big. And it tapers to 6 meters at the back. So... it was a substantial structure, and I can't, off the top of my head, remember how big West Kennet is. It's nothing like as big as West Kennet.
I was just about to say.
But nevertheless, it's, that's a stonking piece of architecture, really. It's you see, all this stuff. They found last year. The last few years, they've been tipping up more and more stuff, which it always makes me choke when they say they've found another temple. When I just want to hit people, I really do.
I think we're probably going to hear you say that quite a lot.
Yes, it will
months,
never go
years.
away. This eternal presumption that it has to be religious. In fact, I heard. I'm not going to name names because people do wonderful work and it doesn't seem fair. But I did hear not long ago somebody say that, and it was in relation to Stonehenge, which is another one of the vast henges within the Wiltshire complex, that nobody knows what happened, or nobody has any idea what happened within these banks. But clearly it was for ceremonial purposes. It's like, you can't have one without the other. It does. It drives me potty, frankly. But, you know.
But Kat's brain, anything that they've unearthed from the interior, well, that tells us about how it looked and the dimensions, etc.
Yeah, well, they have found that it was certainly well, I say certainly, it was probably a roofed timber hall. So the everything that they've found style-wise so far implies that it was the same build as early Neolithic houses.
So hang about a minute. I mean, I don't know everything, and I'm no academic, but the only time I can remember that a barrow being described as originally having a timber structure at its origin was Wayland Smithy. And do you know where I know that from?
I said it.
You said that in the film.
Yeah.
But that's the only time. But, you know, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are others, but it's interesting.
It is interesting. It is interesting. And I think that the trouble is that because so much of archaeology it's an interpretive science. And so when you have a site, because I think Wayland Smithy, I'm ashamed to say my memory should be better, but with everything that's recorded about it, so if I said that it was a timber structure, then I wouldn't have made that up. I just don't remember where I researched that from off the top of my head. Now, the thing is, if you have a site that to all intents and purposes, imagine you've got a cardboard box and you find another cardboard box and another cardboard box, and it's only with one of them that you find out how the actual leaves of it overlapped, then it's not unreasonable to assume that with the others that all look the same, but they haven't got the flaps, it's not unreasonable to assume that they had overlapping flaps in the same way. It's that sort of interpretive deduction, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. But in the meantime, not a lot else we can say probably about the new long barrow at Cat's Brain.
Watch this space.
Indeed. But the other thing I recall coming up recently is something about they've found where the architects of Stonehenge hung out.
Dear. Yeah. I'm going to be rude again because when I read that article, I know I'm being unfair, but when I read that article, the first thing I thought, because I have this knee-jerk grumpy old man attitude when anybody says something like that. It's like, well, why can't it have been where the caterers were? Because the caterers would have probably been far more numerous and important on a daily basis than the architects. But their other reason for saying that they think they might have found the place where the architects hung out was that there was a correlation between the numbers of wooden posts, that they found post holes. The numbers of post holes, they seem to relate to the numbers of stones worked at Stonehenge. So it's possible that they were, they were doing a trial run with wooden posts to see if this worked and that worked. It is possible, but we will never know.
Fair dues. Interestingly, also just, it's amazing what lurks at the back of one's brain. But isn't there another monument or building or construction near Stonehenge. Actually, I think it's nearer West Kennet. That is called the Sanctuary.
Yeah.
And didn't I have it that they had construed that this was the place of study?
Yes.
Of learning, to do with Stonehenge, where people came to learn how to be a Neolithic wise man or Bronze Age.
The trouble is, as far as I can tell, there is absolutely not one shred of evidence to support any of these suppositions. I actually don't know where they come from.
None.
And you see,
well, they come from people's brains. This is the thing. They come from mostly what they like things to be. And I am. Call me boring. I am obsessed by actually using evidence to lead you in a direction rather than just making something up. And one of the more significant things, really, we know that they found within the Wiltshire complex, we've got Durrington round the corner from Stonehenge. We've got Mardenhenge up the road. These are two vast henges. And, they would have housed thousands of people. Now, what's particularly interesting about Durrington is that, the glory of modern technology, that when they dug up all the animal remains, this was where it seemed to be a massive feasting place, and they dug up all these remains. And so they could do isotope analysis on teeth and bones. And they found that loads of these animals had been driven down from Scotland. Yeah.
Now, that's exciting.
Well, it blows open huge questions and, very interesting contexts for exercising the brain, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it could very much... the two particular possibilities. One is that, here you go, the Wiltshire complex is indeed the capital of megalithic Britain, and people come from all over the country to take part in, even if it's the biggest market in the country. We don't know. Got no idea. Maybe it was the biggest annual ceremony. Again, don't know. But whatever it was, people came from Scotland to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Now, there's the other possibility that this was just trading, and the farmers in Scotland knew that maybe they'd get the best prices or sell the most head of cattle or swine, whatever it was, if they brought them down to Wiltshire. Now, how many days it would have taken to walk down? Not that many. People walked large distances back then. But even so, you're talking about a couple of weeks to bring all your cattle down. That's a lot of effort to go to, unless you're pretty sure that you're either going to sell them all or you're doing it for a very good knees up. And certainly the amount of animal remains they found at Durrington does show quite clearly that this was some major party venue.
Yeah. Well, there are all sorts of
you have
pictures.
to also laugh that you look at rock and roll still very much a part of Wiltshire.
Yes. Doug. Yeah, some people will get the reference. Anyway, but all sorts of pictures get conjured up in the mind. Immediately when we think about cattle being driven long distances, that we should think perhaps in terms of still people being semi-nomadic, in which case it's not necessary even that, although it's quite a large... it is the largest. It is a large community thing. It's not necessary that it has to be occupied all the time wholly. It could be...
That's a good point.
A place that, people came to from all over the country, but only at a particular time, perhaps.
No,
and I don't know how you would
point.
begin to investigate that, how that would show up in the archaeology. But so until that time, that's a mere kind of speculation, I suppose. Yeah.
Yes.
So, do you think we've sort of kind of redressed the balance a little bit there? Do you think we've done Stonehenge a little bit more justice now in our little
I think we have. We could go on and on and on if we wanted to really dig it all over. But I think we've redressed the balance a bit.
Well, I hope, dear listeners, you think we have too. So, with that, I think we will move on.
Indeed.
So that's the bulk of our first podcast over, but not before we come to the final bit where we'd like to wrap up. We've decided we'd like to wrap the program up and certainly this will be an ongoing convention. I think that we wrap the podcast up with a few lighter segments, beginning with some questions that may have come up over the last month or so, through Facebook or Twitter or what have you. Something that, challenges the grey matter. Have you got anything there then, Rupert? I think you have.
I certainly have. I got a lovely question in from Mo Keown in Hertfordshire. And Mo, I shall read it to you. She said, Rupert, can I ask your opinion on something? Reading about long barrows, it's said that the ancient people chose standing stones for barrows based on the patterns on the stones, i.e. that they resemble faces, etc. What's your view on that theory? Now, she goes on to mention she'd seen a lecture where somebody was seeing, they thought that the face, that there was a face on the stone in this particular barrow, and she saw something quite different. So for her, it was a pure case of pareidolia, which
I knew there was a word for it. I knew there was a word.
I know, and I know. You see, I have to say, Mo, I can't tell you how much we applaud you for using the word pareidolia. It doesn't get used anything like often enough. For those of you that don't know, it's the human condition where we do like to see patterns where they don't really belong. So a bit like the face on Mars and that sort of stuff, where we just faces in the fire, that kind of thing. Now, I have to say, my attitude to figures in stones is no, I don't think so. I think that every now and again there's one where you can imagine there's a bunch of guys who are out looking for large lumps of rock to bring back to use, and somebody might have said, "Oh, look, that one looks like an aurochs, maybe we'll have that one." Fair enough if it's a manageable size stone. But if you're actually out looking for a 40-ton lump of rock, I don't think you're going to dismiss an absolute perfectly shaped rock because it hasn't got Uncle Bob's face on it. I just don't really think it would have been a major factor at all.
I think you speak words of wisdom, Rupert Soskin.
Steady.
Yeah, well, do you think that that's the question? Like, we can't really expand on that much more.
I don't think so. I think the only thing of any merit to say is that every now and again, if you go back further, so well before the Neolithic, if you go back into Paleolithic, particularly with cave paintings, that there were times when you could see that there was a shape in the rock that the artists were inspired to take as a base for, so they would start to paint an image around something that was already in the rock. So I do think that happened in caves and in cave art. I don't really think it happened in, the selection of stones. Of course, listeners, if you want to argue with us, then please do feel free.
Please do feel free. But in the meantime, thank you very much, Mo, for the question. And this is, of course, an invitation for anybody who has a burning question they'd like to have answered in this section. Well, you know where we are and how to contact us on Facebook or Twitter or
Excellent.
Instagram even. Yeah. So we look forward to that. So that's for this moment, for this podcast, the questions section over. Another regular section that we're going to have some fun with, I think, is the next one, which we're calling Stonehead of the Month.
This is a fun one. We all know one, don't we? Go on, Mike. I'm going to hand this one to you.
Not in a pejorative way either.
No, in a wonderful way. I mean, just
it's an honourable position. It's an honourable.
In fact, it's something that I think. Well, no, I'll speak for both of us here. We both find it really. It's funny and it's exciting and it's something that we all share. This thing we do like to get out and look for stones in the middle of nowhere. So this month, who have we got this month, Mike?
Well, his name is Lee Price.
Hello, Lee.
Yeah, but you know more about Lee than I do. Not that either of them us have spoken to. Though I know who Lee is on Instagram, and I've seen lots of his wonderful photographs.
Well, Lee
Price 37 his moniker is on Instagram.
Yeah, so that's a shout out there.
So why is Lee Stonehead of the Month?
Lee is Stonehead of the Month because, apart from the fact that he is, he's an obsessive stonehead, but he loves standing with stones. He's a big fan of ours. He's watched it. He's watched it more times than is frankly reasonable. And I would say, Lee, you need to get out more. But apparently, he's out every weekend stamping across Dartmoor. And you can see from his page on Instagram, go and have a look, Price 37, as Michael said, and just loads of photographs of different places that he and his partner have visited. And it's, happy to have you as our first Stonehead of the month, Lee. Well done, that man.
Hooray!
Hooray!
Applause!
Hooray!
Congratulations, Lee Price, Stonehead of the Month. Final piece in this first podcast, another regular item, we hope, a little piece of whimsy from the world of megalithomania.
We've got two bits of whimsy really in this.
Two bits of whimsy.
Well, there's one that this isn't even whimsy; it's actually appalling. But I had to put it in the whimsy section just because.
Should we have an appalling section as well?
We probably should, because I'm sure we wouldn't have to work too hard to find some.
We may massage the title of this section, so that it includes the appalling and the most dreadful.
The horrendous thing about this is that Göbekli Tepe. I mean, anybody who is really into archaeology is enthralled by Göbekli Tepe. It is the oldest known site, particularly of any megalithic structure. It is 9,000 years old on the megalithic side, and so obviously we've been trying to find out as much as we possibly can. And this hugely respected archaeologist, James Millard, who died in 2012, turns out was an abject faker and spent years discovering, in inverted commas, his own fakes, including inscriptions and all sorts. And he was just making them all up and pretending that he'd found them. So there's an awful lot of stuff that we apply to sites like this that, no, sorry, load of nonsense. And there you go. So James Millard, and anything you read of his, take it with a very, very large pinch of salt.
Oh, dear.
I know.
Why would you do that?
Well, it's shocking, isn't it?
I suppose, it seems like a good idea at the time. And once you start, it's...
Yes. I know. Shocking. Anyway.
Sad but true.
Sad but true.
Okay,
but there you go.
moving along.
On a true whimsy side, and I absolutely love this.
Yes.
It's because of all the archaeological diggings in Wiltshire. And, as we've been talking about, so much stuff has been uncovered across, right the way from, however many miles in each direction from Stonehenge. And they uncovered, at Lark Hill, they uncovered some First World War trenches. Now, these were for, what do you call it, manoeuvres when you're military practice and all the rest of it.
Manoeuvres.
Yes, thank you. They were manoeuvres. So training grounds for troops. And in amongst the trenches, they found an MG, they dug up a 19. What was it? A K2 MG? Can you remember, Mike? What was the model car that was?
No, you got it's 1930s.
They uncovered a red 1930s MG sports car, and it had actually been buried in a gun emplacement. And nobody could understand, how on earth did this happen? How had a gun got into how had the car got into a gun emplacement? And when there's a big
an MG J2.
There you go. That's the baby.
MG enthusiasts out there. That's it. Yeah.
And it was a big mystery, obviously, until this man Patrick Shannon stuck his hand up and said, well, yeah, he was one of them. As a boy, he lived in the area in the 1960s, and Lark Hill was mostly tin huts then. They were still, the remains of, the military training grounds. And he and his gang, he was one of the younger lads in the gang, but they used to play in this just abandoned MG, and they used to push it up the hill, all of them together, and then get in it and roll down the hill and just have a laugh. And then apparently there was one day when some of the older boys decided that this hill wasn't anything like fun enough, so they all pushed it up a bigger hill and completely lost control. And there's, boys jumping out and falling out as this thing rocketed down the hill and ended up in the gun emplacement where it stayed. Between them, they could never haul it out again. And so the time came when the whole site was filled in, and the car was never taken out. It was just filled in with the car in place. So, Pat Shannon, good on you, mate.
Yeah, great story.
You see, archaeology is not always about things that are thousands of years old.
Yeah. Archaeology rocks, mate.
It does, mate.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Which brings us to the very end of the first Standing with Stones podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we hope you've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed making it.
Indeed.
Mind you, thereby hangs a tale, us and tech. But we've gotten there in the end. We've got there in the end. So, one more thing before we go. Just a reminder that thank you for being here and popping in and listening. But a reminder, we'd love your support via Patreon if you can. There are loads of wonderful perks and rewards available depending on what kind of level you choose to support us at. Have a look. The link will be down below, of course. These podcasts will remain free for everyone, but behind the scenes and other stuff that we'll make, that will only be available to our contributing patrons. So, thank you again. And it's goodbye from...
It's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him, and it's goodbye from me.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.